All right, good evening. This is Peter Pingator. I'm the chair of the Community Preservation Committee. This is our scheduled March 16th, 2022 public hearing for applications for funding for fiscal year 2023. I just want to note this is the first time the committee has met in person since March of 2020. So I'm happy that we're all here. I'm happy that the public is here. We are also live streaming, so we have that technology going so folks can listen at home as well. Yes,
Mr. Lake. Some text that people are having a hard time accessing it. They're saying it's password protected.
Okay.
What's the network name?
Need wireless.
Need wireless, okay.
I have, if they do need a password, it would be, usually they can just click on the link and that should send them right to it. But the passcode is 636249. It should also be on the agenda, I believe.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, that's right. All right, so those listening or trying to listen at home, if you look at the meeting agenda, which was posted with the town clerk's office, you'll see a link for Zoom and a passcode on there as well. So we have both the public accessing this meeting through Zoom, and we are here present together. We're going to continue with our roll call. All votes will be in roll call because we're going hybrid. And so first we're going to start with the roll call of our attendance. And I'll call your name and you can respond. Lauradorfman.
Here.
Artie Crocker.
Here.
Reg Foster.
Here.
Joe Barnes.
Here.
Chris Gerstel.
Here.
Bob Dermody.
Here.
And I believe Rick Zambone is listening in. And so we're going to count him as present. He doesn't need to be visually, we don't need to see him visually. He can log in by telephone, but if he can signal that he is present, that would be helpful.
Peter, I'm presently here. I'm not sure for how long, but I am here.
Okay, the only thing I would ask you to do is if you could note for the record when it is that you're going to sign off, just so we have a clean record of when it was that you were present and when it was that you left, if at all. Okay.
Yeah, not a problem. And I'll raise my hand if I need anything. All right.
Okay, great. All right, so it looks like we're missing Jean McKnight. I'm sure she will be on her way. As I said, this is our public hearing for applications for FY 2023. Most of you are familiar with the Community Preservation Committee and the process involved in funding CPC applications. But for those of you who are not, I will briefly explain that as a participating town, Needham, in the Community Preservation Act, the CPA awards grants to applicants to support community housing, preservation or restoration of historic resources, acquisition and preservation of open space, and restoration and investment in recreational resources. CPC funds are generated from a property tax surcharge. In Needham, it is 2%. The state provides a matching fund, not dollar for dollar, and it is through a rather complex formula. And basically, it's revenue generated from registry fees. Each year at town meetings, CPC funds are appropriated based on recommendations from this committee to town meeting. Town meeting votes on whether to accept or reject the recommendation for funding by this committee. Prior to our vote on recommending funding or not, we accept applications beginning December 1, or actually they're due on December 1. We assign liaisons, usually 2 individual members of this committee. They conduct due diligence on the request for funding. The committee consults with the select board. The committee consults with the finance committee, and the committee seeks input from the public on the applications pending before it. And this is the opportunity for the public this evening to provide input on each application for funding. There are a total of 8 CPC applications, so we have a full docket. There's also a request that kind of an internally generated request by the committee to discuss and seek public input concerning increasing the allocation to the Community Housing Reserve Fund from 11% to 22%. Without getting too deep in the weeds, under the statute, we are required to spend or allocate funds in certain areas, one of which is community housing, and it is of 10%. In order to ensure that we actually match up, because of the matching funds come in late, we appropriate 11%. What we have done, and we actually approved this through town meeting last year, was we increased that allocation to the Community Housing Reserve from 11% to 22% for reasons we can discuss when that comes up later in the proceeding. So here's how we'll proceed. With respect to each application, a CPC member will read one line or two introducing the application. A representative of the applicant will make a short presentation, hopefully in the area somewhere near 5 minutes. If that's not possible at all, I understand. With respect to each application, we will ask for public comments and questions. With respect to people who are making comments or asking questions, please state your name and your address for the record. Address your remarks to the chair, me, and let's not have cross-talking in the room, okay? So that everyone can have an opportunity to speak, please limit your remarks, maybe to 2 or 3 minutes. Be precise and concise. The more precise and concise you are, the more time you will allow for your neighbors to speak and address us as well. Now, and also if you want to speak again on an application, we're going to wait till everyone has an opportunity, then you can speak again. We like to have new information. We like to have personal knowledge. That's very helpful. It's not necessary to repeat what someone else said. You can stand up and say, I agree with Ms. or Mr. So-and-so about regarding the application. I agree with the previous speaker. And that's effective, of course, because petitioning the government is a good thing. So sometimes you'll ask questions. If you have questions, we will keep note of them. And after we finish taking comments at the end, with respect to each application, we'll address the questions, okay? Now, last note, and this is the bonus round. There are limited funds in the program. As you know, it's about $4 or $5 million, $4 million or so a year in revenue. We have a lot of applications. We have a lot of needs in the community. We anticipate that there will continue to be significant funding requests and dollar amounts in coming years. And what would be particularly helpful to the committee is, as you address a particular application, if you could provide in general terms your priorities for use of CPC funds in this funding cycle and in coming years, okay? Okay, so with that, we will begin. And the first presentation is FY 2023-01 Needham Housing Authority Property Survey.
Real quick, I have one raised hand in the audience. Do you want to address that now or wait?
Sure.
Penny, if you want to unmute yourself, I saw your hand was raised.
I was only indicating that I had no sound, but I have sound now.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Okay. All right.
Just one quick side note, if you don't mind. I know this is our first meeting back that we've had in a while. If we can just ask all of our guests to silence their cell phones while we were presenting, I think that would be a great courtesy to everybody so we can hear all the comments and questions that come in. I know it's been a while, but just an active reminder.
And us as
Great.
well. Yes, us as well.
Great. That's a great reminder. Okay. And one final note, Jean McKnight, you are now present, right?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Welcome. All right. All right. So now we are going on to the presentations and the questions and comments regarding FY 23-01. And who is the liaison who's going to make the intro
I am.
presentation? Okay.
I am.
Lauradorfman.
My name is Lauradorfman. I'm a member of the CPC. I'm here to introduce Reg Foster,
You can talk to me.
Louder. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. My name is Lauradorfman. I'm a member of the CPC, and I'm here to introduce Reg Foster, who's going to present information on FY 2301. This is a request for property conditions reports for 3 properties owned by the Needham Housing Authority, located at Seabeds Way, Captain Robert Cook Drive, and High Rock Estates.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. And I'm the chair of the Needham Housing Authority. We're requesting $132,632 of CPA funds for the 3 reports that were referred to, and also for a property survey. So 4 reports altogether. And the Needham Housing Authority is going to match that amount of money with a like amount from our management reserve. So the total cost of the project's just a little bit less than $247,000. We are taking advantage of 4 federal programs that allow the Needham Housing Authority to change from the funding stream that we are using today to a new funding stream. It's called repositioning. What these 4 analytical reports are prerequisites for putting in the application for this repositioning to a new federal funding stream, which is planned for this fall. The projects that we're going to be doing are modernization of our Seabeds Way property, which is for the seniors and 46 apartments, 4 buildings, modernization of Captain Robert Cook, development, 6 buildings with 30 apartments for families, and redevelopment of High Rock Estates, which are 60 one-family bungalows, 2 to 3 bedrooms apiece. And what we will be doing is redeveloping them into 60 duplexes. They are on 10,000 square foot lots. The problem we're trying to solve is that we've been on starvation funding from the federal government for decades. And there's been an accumulation of deferred maintenance and other things that need to be done. And in the case of the first 2 developments, those developments were built about 40 years ago and can be modernized or got renovated, if you will, and basically brought into the 21st century, brought up to code, and have their useful lifetime extended by another 40 or 50 years if we make this investment. The High Rock Estates bungalows, the 60 bungalows in the High Rock neighborhood, are more than 70 years old. They were originally housing for returning veterans, World War II, and they're at the end of their useful lifetime. And there are many, many other deficiencies that need to be corrected while we're at it. The benefits to Needham is by spending this 132,000 and change of CPA funds plus the NHA matching money, we expect to unlock just about $43 million of new funding from this new funding stream over the next 20 years. It means that all these units will continue as deeply affordable housing units in Needham, and that means affordable to people who make less than 50% of the area median income. If we spend this money, if town meeting approves it, we expect to be able to start the renovation projects in the second half of calendar year 2023, i.e. next year. And that's for the modernization projects. The redevelopment projects, we're going to have to do some additional fundraising, and there's a clear funding path using low-income tax credits to do that. And but it's going to take us another year or 2 to do that, which we'll be doing in parallel. And so we're now projecting to begin at least the first phase of the High Rock Estates redevelopment, maybe the first 20 of those bungalows, turning them into duplexes sometime during calendar year 2024. So that's what the proposal is.
Okay, thank you. All right, so, and just note that we put up the slides.
Thank you. And it's just easier for me to read
I
here
understand.
than look over there.
Right, it took us a minute or two to get them up. I'm let you know that
Thank
they're
you.
available. All right, thank you for the presentation.
And I would note that was 4 minutes and 35 seconds.
It was you, I was keeping a watchful eye. I was keeping a watchful eye on you. Okay, comments from, we can, I don't, the usual, leave that up for now. So we're in the middle of the presentation. So let's leave that material up while we take comments and questions. Okay.
There's one raised hand in the audience.
Okay, great.
Ross, if you want to unmute yourself.
All right, there we go. Yeah. Okay, well, I don't, if you can hear me, congratulations on returning to a live meeting. I can't see anybody. Exit full screen, squad video share. Okay, there's something. I'm sorry I can't make it in person. I think it's better to be more effective to have a personal connection, which leads me to my general observation that despite the governor's allowances as to Zoom meetings qualifying as public meetings, I don't think they do. I think the technology is lacking. People aren't making an effort to make the Zoom meetings more public. So that's too bad. In general, throughout this process, the residents have not been included. Linden Chambers does not have a local tenants organization. There is some Seabeds group. I guess they meet once a month. I haven't been able to get over there. Like to use the Zoom meetings. We have a large screen TV, and we'd like to be able to use that. We tried to hold meetings in that way, but as a matter of fact, I'd probably have more to say. I don't know whether you can see. Can you see me? I can't tell whether you're seeing anything.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
This report, I'm showing the report that I have, the paper report. I just got something I communicated with one of your excellent staff people. And the reason why I wanted to get it was because I'm a resident. I've been attending a lot of these meetings, and this is the first time I've seen these proposals in this form. So,
okay. Any other
comments? I think we'll have more to say about it as we learn how to access the information. I think throughout this housing interest process and so forth, we need to have something like an information clearinghouse. I know the town is working on the web page and things like that, but I've had a lot of documents referred to town planning from 2007 and other things. Just yesterday, I was working on some plant studies from 2003 funded by the Conservation Commission. And that person referred to a previous plant survey for the town from 1885. You know, it's interesting to see some of these, have access to some of this information.
Mr. Donnell,
whether it's current or old. Yeah.
Could you limit your comments to the application that's in front of us? Okay, can you do that? Do you have anything to say about the?
I'd like especially since one of the purposes of the CPA is to consider historical aspects. I hope you can include that when you evaluate the I hope we can bring it up, and it includes the residents or other people that are interested in the historical merits of the veterans housing, which I'm going to try and call veterans housing and not bungalows. They're not bungalows, they're maybe cottages or farmhouses or something like that. And also the historical value and importance of the cluster housing, which I view as sort of the first wave of urban planning. The permit was pulled in 1959, and I think that is a laudable demonstration of, there's one person in one of the units that has no air conditioning because he has a lot of light shade, and ventilation. So, and also, a lot of the plans that are being referred to, the designs are not settled. They're all pre-pandemic, you know, so that should change things. Our interest in open space has changed and should continue to change.
Okay. All right.
And I would quibble. I would also like to quibble. It seems like the argument is made, and I'm not objecting to this funding. I think the funding should go forward, but to refer to the dilapidated condition as it's been described of some of the housing as due to starvation funding, I think is not quite accurate. It's not due to inadequate capital improvements and such terminology. I'm trying to get a leaky faucet fixed. It's been 5 years. I don't need over $1 million to address this issue.
So we're now at about 5 minutes with your comments.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
the
we
public
will
will limit them.
continue, and I hope there will be an effort made to include residents. I actually have been, I was part of a CDC that did a 210 units of housing on Mission Hill, you know?
I know
So
you've
there's a lot
already
of experience here.
Okay, good. You've already noted that you want resident input, and I've written down your comments, and we will take them and keep them in mind. Okay, I really thank you for participating.
Thank
we
you.
need to move on to someone else. Thank you. Okay, have a good evening. All right, and is there anyone else?
I did receive one in the written question and answer that I can read out loud. It just says from Anna Aguilera at 12 Glenwood Road. She says, I am a Needham resident and I support investing in affordable housing in Needham. Thank you.
Okay, good. And we've also received many emails and those are quite effective. We have them printed out and we have them. So for the listening public, if you don't want to speak, you can send us an email. Consider that as well. Okay. Any other no comments from the audience? All right, great. Let's move on to 2023-02, Needham Housing Authority Schematic Design, Linden Chambers.
Lauradorfman here again, introducing Reg Foster again. Reg wants to present some information on FY 2302, the pre-development design costs for the Linden Chambers redevelopment project.
Thank you, Laura. So we are requesting $1.386 million for this application. And the reason for that has to do with the issues with this property. The Linden Street property was constructed in the mid to late 60s, and the Chambers Street was constructed in the early 70s. There are 152 units of housing for the seniors and disabled. However, there's a lot of problems. First of all, the buildings are worn out. For the same reasons I cited before, we haven't had adequate funding to keep up with things. But also, they were constructed during the building standards of that era. So there's a number of problems with them. And what anybody wants additional detail, because I'm trying to keep to the 5 minutes, there's a 10 or 15 page fact sheet. There's copies of it sitting on the chair over there, and it's also available in the public information site for the public hearing. The deficiencies include things like the laundries are on the second floor of a building with no elevators for seniors. There is almost no storage, really no storage whatsoever. The units themselves are studio apartments, 152 of them, 400 square feet, 430 square feet. Some of you may know that that's just really tiny and certainly substandard by this era, which is the standard's more like 525 square feet for a small apartment for a senior, one-bedroom apartment. This project has been a Needham priority for a long time, and the purpose of doing this is it will move us one phase closer to being what is sometimes called euphemistically a shovel-ready project, and that is that we will go through all the design activities, the studies, There are wetlands there that have to be dealt with, utilities, and produce an actual viable design that we can then run by the planning board and say, this is what we're thinking about what we're doing, because we will require zoning changes and we'll have to work out whether those zoning changes are acceptable to the town or not. Most importantly, we still lack the funding to even start with the first phase of a redevelopment of this property. But to get there, we really have to have a viable project that has been completely thought through with all the issues worked through by architects and engineers who have experience with this sort of thing. And, you know, if we are able to do this, and this is a sum of money that we start spending this summer after putting out an RFP or a request for services for an architectural engineering firm to basically do this pre-development and the schematic design. About a year after we start, we'll have something that we can really start shopping around to look for the funding that is needed in order to not only do the redevelopment of the 152 units, but there are, you know, glimpses that we might be able to create 200 units, so maybe 50 more units or something like that. But again, this is all back of the envelope guesses at this point. We have pretty elevation pictures and so forth on how it might possibly look, but it isn't real at this point in time. And if we do that, it'll put us in the position of maybe even starting with a phase one with the the first 24 units on, redevelop the first 24 units, which is a manageable size project from a funding point of view. And that would probably unlock about $25 million of non-Needham funds in order to fund that construction. The benefits for Needham after even the phase one redevelopment, but also certainly after the entire redevelopment, is we are required and we're committed to, of course, that all the units would still continue to be deeply affordable units of senior housing. Again, to remind you what that means, for people who make less than 50% of the area median income. And what also makes them deeply affordable is by law and regulation, nobody in our housing units, no family and no individual pays more than 30% of their income for rent. So if you lose your job as a family, or if you're living off of Social Security and you're only making $15,000 or $20,000 a year, then you don't pay more than that 30%. And the rest of it comes from subsidy that is provided by the state and the federal government. We'll, of course, correct all those deficiencies. The apartments that will be redeveloped will be, probably all one-bedroom apartments, but 525 square feet. There will be storage, there'll be laundry facilities, there'll be elevators, et cetera, and a lot more spelled out in the handout. And as I mentioned, the benefit to Needham, there's maybe more units that we can build on. It's an 8.4 acre piece of property right across from the High Rock Middle School.
Okay, thank you, Reg. Okay, questions, comments from the audience? Yes, state your name and your address.
Joe Legburn, 40 Linden Street, Precinct 8 town member. As both a neighbor and a representative of the folks that live in Linden Chambers, I totally support this. This housing needs to be upgraded and improved, and I wholeheartedly support this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from our audience here? Questions? No. All right, someone has their hand up?
Nope, they put their hand down.
Okay, good. I'll note that we've gotten some emails supporting the projects as well. Okay. All right. We're going to move on then to FY20. Chris, do you have your hand up?
No,
Sorry. Okay. FY20 2303, and this is another Needham Housing Authority request. Purchase of East Militia Heights property. Chris Gerstel will be on. These are individuals who actually, one of the two individuals that acted as liaisons who do the introduction. They know a lot more than the two sentences that they read to you. Trust me. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. As yes described, I am the liaison for FY 2023-03. This is the purchase of the East Militia Heights Drive property. A brief little description of this is that this is formerly part of the overall Nike property, currently owned by the U.S. Army. It is a surplus property for sale, which lies on 3.5 acres of land. On that 3.5 acres are 12 three-bedroom single-family homes, and it is located off the East Militia Heights Drive across from the Charles River Center. The amount requested for this project is currently standing at $1,826,000. And to give us a brief description of the scope of the project, I will hand this over to Reg Foster.
Thank you, Chris. And how do we come up with $1.826 million, you might ask? The answer is that we had a full-fledged appraisal done by a professional appraiser that evaluated the fair market value of this particular property under the government's disposal regulations for this particular property. The government, in this case it's the Army, that is the instrument here, it puts out an RFP and will sell the property to the bidder that offers the best deal over the fair market value of that property. So we had the appraisal done. It was about $1.7 million in change for that 3.5 acre piece of property. We all know what's been going on in development in Needham over the last 2 or 3 years, but there's reasons why that is the right number, and that appraisal has been provided to the Community Preservation Committee. And then there's another $80,000 worth of transaction fees to get it done. Chris already described the property well, and so I'm not going to repeat that. But I will add one more thing. We have had a chance to evaluate the 12, I will call them cottages, because they're very similar to our High Rock estate buildings in the High Rock area, the 60, what I've mistakenly called something else, and are now calling cottages, and they're in very good shape. When we were pleasantly surprised, they've been occupied by military families up until the end of 2018. They were well maintained, and we have a good estimate of how much it would take to basically do some repairs, new paint job. Half of them need new roofs, et cetera, et cetera. So we know exactly what we're getting to, about $1.2 million in all. So this means that if the Needham Housing Authority is able to do this, the cost of acquisition is in approximately $250,000 a unit for 3-bedroom houses, 1,300 square feet, very, very nice, in a very nice location. And those of you know what construction costs have grown to, in the last few years, that's, less than half, or maybe a third of what it would actually cost to, construct new 3-bedroom units of that size, even assuming that we had the land to put them on, which we don't. The benefits to Needham are that, in about a year, if we're able to acquire this property, maybe a year and a half, we would have 12 additional units of equally affordable housing for families in Needham. Again, families that make less than 50% of the area median income. It's a bargain. The other thing I just want to mention in passing is very late in the game, a letter arrived from the Charles River Center expressing a high degree of interest in the property themselves. We don't, at the Needham Housing Authority, regard that as necessarily at all a negative, because what they do and what their mission is extremely consistent to what we do and what our mission is. But the Needham Housing Authority Board hasn't had a chance to meet yet to consider the implications of the letter. And so that's one thing that is outstanding at this moment and should be worked out over the next couple of weeks here.
Great. All right. Thank you, Reg. Okay. We're ready for comments and questions. Yes, sir. State your name and your address for the record.
My name is Bruceeisenhut. I live at 106 Martree Road, town meeting member. As some of you know, I was on the planning board for 15 years. I was one of the original members of this very committee. Been very interested in this issue. I strongly support this very rare opportunity, and I agree with the characterization as a bargain. If anyone has visited that land, it's truly unique and beautiful. My hesitation came about when someone explained to me, well, there are some certain zoning issues, and this is more inquiry, because I'm basing this on what others have told me, that perhaps the current zoning, the current uses has been abandoned or extinguished, however you want to phrase it. And so there may be need for a solution either through what I would call a friendly 40B application or maybe even a change to the zoning map. But given the history of the land, historical use, its rare characteristics, the fact that both the state and hopefully this town has a strong interest in providing housing for low and moderate income families and for the elderly on fixed incomes and for the disabled. Given all those factors, there's not going to be any typical NIMBY opposition to a 40B application. I think that I heard about Charles River as well, but I'm certain that if you sat down and talked out a joint project, go to town with that, whether it's through a 40B project or a zoning map change, you wouldn't have any problem. You wouldn't have any likelihood of defeat. I think it would absolutely be a project that the whole town could get behind, and I strongly support it.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Mr. Estes. All right, any other comments? Yes. Will you state your name and your address?
My name is Susan Welby. I live at 857 Webster Street, and I'm a town meeting member from Precinct G. I have a question about access. I know that this property was originally acquired from Babson. It didn't belong to the town of Needham, it belonged to Babson College. And the access road is by right of way through Babson. Has anybody talked to Babson about what they are looking to do with that property if it becomes available? And would they grant access?
Okay, well, that's a question. We'll handle that at the end of your comments, but thank you for the question. Okay. Any other comments?
I have 5 hands raised.
Okay, let's take them in order. First come, first serve.
Okay.
First in time, first in right.
And I think I figured out how to get their video on if they would like, so I'm gonna try that option. All right, Jim, if you want to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and make your comment.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Jim Flanagan. I live at 863 Webster Street. Thank you to the committee chair and all the members for your thoughtful and generous service to our community. I am in support of all of the Needham Housing Authority funding requests, and particularly this request related to Militia Heights. To date, I have not heard any informed opposition to the acquisition. Only vague statements about prioritization, skepticism based on past delays by the federal government, and concern about what others might do. People who are opposed to this should bring specifics and not shade. They should also present alternatives that are at least as shovel-ready and affordable. I encourage folks to see this neighborhood that is ready to rebloom into a safe and vibrant neighborhood. There's even a beautiful playground and gazebo at the end of the street. Finally, some history. I understand that these 12 homes were initially built by the Army in the 1950s to help accommodate the families of African-American servicemen since local residents would often not rent to them. Let that sink in. This can be a small but important step to begin to redress our past housing discrimination. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Flanagan. Thank you very much. Okay. Next question or comment from our listening audience.
All right. Next, I'm gonna bring in Rachel Green. Rachel, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Rachel Green. I'm at 55 Sargent Street. I would agree with everything that Jim said. I really support all 4 NHA applications, especially the Militia Heights one. It's a great opportunity. And lastly, I would hope that the CBC prioritizes affordable housing in this and coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Okay, next.
Next is Oscar Mertz.
Okay. Mr. Mertz.
Moving a little faster than technology, sorry.
Okay.
Great. All right, Oscar, if you want to unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening. Again, many thanks to all of you working on this this project in your various capacities. I would like to support, as others have, for this as a unique opportunity for our Needham Housing Authority, and I love the collaborative benefits with the Charles River Center. What I am also intrigued with is that this is a unique property, and as I'm a member of the Housing Plan Working Group currently looking at housing opportunities in our town, I think the looking at this for some of those zoning issues is definitely on the plate. And I think one of the things that I'm curious about is that with this remarkable opportunity, there is the potential that we might begin to entertain public-private partnerships. And therefore, this might be an opportunity for Needham, the Housing Authority, to use this property as a tremendous benefit, as Reg had explained, for a good, it's pennies on the dollar or 50 cents on the dollar, for the immediate needs, for swing space, for work underway, and then for families to use, but potentially even in the distant future, perhaps an opportunity to make this a little bit denser, build back the affordable housing, and then have some partnership with the ability to build even more housing up there that could be subsidized, and also market rate to be able to make that subsidized housing. So I think there's some really interesting upsides because of this unique location, the value of that view, the as was mentioned, the lack of sort of an abutter concern or an immediate abutter concern. So I think it's an intriguing site, and it could really be an interesting one for the Needham Housing Authority to work with and provide even more housing down the road, and a great opportunity for a mixed kind of community, which we would really love to see more diversity, economic diversity in this town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mertz. Did he state his address? I know.
It's 67.
Did you state your address? Okay.
I can let him back into.
No, it's okay. We'll find him.
67 Ryberry Highway.
Okay, there we go. We have his
Next
address.
is Peter Olive.
All right, Peter Olive.
Peter,
Is he the last? Is he the last one?
One more.
Okay.
Ryberry Hillside, not highway. Excuse me.
Peter, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself. All right.
Let's go on to the next one. Peter is, we already got his email too. So technically he goes to the back of the line.
And the last hand raise is Penny, so.
Okay, good. And then we'll look for Peter again.
Penny, if you want to unmute yourself.
It's over here. Is that it? Hi, everybody. I come from a certain perspective in that I worked as the. Can you hear me?
Yeah, what we'd like you to do, first of all, is state your name and your address.
Oh, and I can open it to me too. Okay. Hi, I'm Penny Kirk. I'm at 100 Rosemary Way in Needham. And I would like to express my support for these 3 projects. I come from a perspective having worked as the service coordinator for 10 years for the Needham Housing Authority. I'm very well aware of the condition of all of the buildings. I've been in almost every one of them over that 10-year period, and they are in need of improvement or replacement. So I strongly support all 3 of these projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kirk. Okay, is Peter Olive still on the line?
He is not.
Okay. All right, we have his email. Okay. All right. That is it. All right, now there's 1.5 questions. The full question is the question of access.
Yes.
Okay. And then the half question is kind of a query about the zoning issues. If you could just touch on those, if you have the capacity to do that.
I can touch very gently on both questions.
All right, good.
So yes, with respect to the access questions, there is a easement over land owned by Babson coming up East Militia Heights Drive from, what's the name of the road there, from over near Flatty Farms and down the back of North Hill. There's also another access to the property over Dwight Road that comes up from Central Avenue, past the Grogan Center and up past the Charles Rivers main campus there. So there are actually 2 private ways that access the property. Our consultants, and when I say our consultants, I should probably mention the Needham Housing Authority isn't doing all this by ourselves. We hired the Cambridge Housing Authority as our planning and development department and consultants. They have a 25 person department, and we basically are using them to help us drive this thing forward because it requires a lot of expertise. Our consultants have analyzed the easement and access to that property, and it's a cloudy record going back to the 50s. So that at some point, if we do get involved in buying this property, there will be an approach to Babson and also an approach to the town of Needham, as best we can tell, controls and owns the access up from Central Avenue. We've had it fully analyzed and done as much as we can to understand it. It would be something that would need to be clarified.
Okay, great. All right.
And you want to touch on the other one?
The
zoning.
Sure.
So the only zoning question is actually that was extensively evaluated during the appraisal process, and after we received the appraisal, there are actually 4 different approaches to dealing with the fact that it's a non-conforming property, depending on how you interpret the town bylaw and how you apply it. But I think, again, even if for no other reason than the reason that was stated in the question, which is if the town is open to doing a friendly 40B, that's actually choice number 4. So I think it obviously isn't done yet, but it does not seem to be a serious concern at this point.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to the fourth and final application by Needham Housing Authority. This is FY 2023-04, Assistant Director, Assistant Executive Director position, and introducing that will be Chris Gerstel.
2 for 2. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I am the liaison for FY 2023-04. What this is a funding request for the Needham Housing Authority Assistant Executive Director position. The amount requested is for $97,500. And the funding is sought to support 2 years of the cost of the new position during the time. 50% of the cost will be paid from the Needham Housing Authority resources, and 50% of the cost would be funded via CPA. To speak on this proposal will be Mr. Reg Foster from the Needham Housing Authority.
Thank you, Chris. So the amount requested is $97,500, but the total cost for 2 years of salary is $195,000. And so we're doing a 50% match on this from our management reserves. The consultants, the 2 rounds of consultants that we've had up until this point in time, actually 3 rounds, have all recommended over the last few years that we recognize that the burden on the executive leadership of the Needham Housing Authority will grow considerably as we get into the Modernization and Redevelopment Authority. And it would be extremely wise for us to recognize the impact on the executive director, and that we should bring on another qualified person as assistant executive director to kind of spread the load and make sure that we stay on top of what is arguably our primary mission, mission number 1, which is to run our 336 units of deeply affordable housing, in absolutely the best way we can, and be an excellent landlord, have the trains run on time, so to speak. And so we are asking the CPC and ultimately town meeting to approve this temporary funding for this position. And we are expecting that after a couple of years, the additional revenue we will be generating from what I've mentioned at the beginning for application number 1 will enable us to continue the funding of that position out of our own resources. And so I would also say, this is before my time, but when we did the first redevelopment project this century, after a hiatus of 20 years, which is a High Rock Homes redevelopment of the cottages into 20 duplexes, it burned out the entire board and the entire management doing it themselves, and nobody was left when they're finished. So the plan had been to do High Rock Homes phase 2 and phase 3, and it hasn't started up again for 12 years since that period of time. So we don't want to make that mistake again in trying to do it ourselves. Thus, we've hired the Cambridge Housing Authority, and we want to recognize that we have to bring on board additional day-to-day management resources for the Housing Authority. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, questions or comments from those present here in the room? All right, any hands up from the listening public?
Nope, I don't see any.
Okay. We've gotten some general support for all applications from some of the earlier commenters, so we noted that. And the same goes with respect to emails that we've received. All right, and we are going to move on then to FY 23-05, and that is the Emery Grover renovation. And that's going to be presented by introduced by Bob Dermody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Bob Dermody, the liaison for this project titled the Emery Grover Renovation Project. This involves comprehensive renovation of the Emery Grover building for continued use by school administration, originally described by BH+A architects in the Emery Grover feasibility study dated June 2020. The program has been reduced in scope to fit within the existing structure. The revised concept eliminates the need for a new 3-story wing in the rear of the building and reflects a more efficient use of shared spaces, common work areas, and relocation of educational technology to other school buildings. The project includes historic rehabilitation of the envelope, renovation and modernization of the interior, and comprehensive code required upgrades. The project includes about 57 on-site parking spaces. It is proposed that Hillside Elementary School would be used as a swing space during construction. The requested amount from CPA committee is $6 million. And Mr. Chair, this time I'd like to call on Superintendent Dan Gutenkantz to speak next.
Okay. Dan Gutenkantz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. If it is with your permission, I want to do two things. One, thank you for even considering this application. I know I speak on behalf of the school committee when I say that your attention to this over time, and perhaps even your consideration of funding any aspect of this program, would be so much appreciated. And then secondly, I'd like to turn over a brief presentation to Joel Bargman from BH+A, who can take you through the application and program.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joel Bargman, BH+A. I know you've seen our presentation, so I've tried to change it for tonight, but still give the public a sense of what we're doing. Can I get slide view on the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
First slide.
Okay.
First slide is
If I do slide view, it takes away the entire slide.
fine. The first slide is important because I wanted to point out it's a national historic building, not Needham historic, but national. It's not a historic location. It's a building which is the highest rating you can get as a historic structure, and that does make it highly eligible for funding. The building was used as a school until 1944. It was originally built in 1897, so it's over 100 years old. School administration moved in 1947. There was a renovation done in the 70s. It was purely an interior renovation. There hasn't been a major comprehensive renovation to the building since 1947. The part of the study that was mentioned is we did studies of private use as an office, private use as a housing development, tear down as a housing development, tear down as an office use, and those were quantified for the return of investment to the town as a property. Through the study process, the project was determined that having a use, the school administration was the highest and best use of the building and the best way to renovate and restore the historic building, which includes energy efficiency.
Hold on.
I'm sorry, I have no idea this was going. I can't even find it.
Just turn the volume down, Reg.
On the side of the phone.
I apologize.
That's okay.
Try to turn it off.
The request for funds you'll see tonight is $6 million, and it's related to two ways to look at it. Primarily, the historic restoration of the outside of the building. It's a $6.2 million project, and I'll walk you through that with the next slides. It's basically a top-down renovation. You can see on the top the dormers have been closed in, and one of the real exciting features of the project, and the reason we don't need the exterior addition, is that whole top floor is being renovated, restored, and brought back to use as a functional space. So it's a historic restoration then from the top down, walls, windows, and as part of this, we are doing a study for how close to net zero the project can be brought, even though it is a historic building. And we're getting close. I'll show you on the next slide. By use of new high-performance windows, we'll go in. These are examples on the upper left. We're closing in the main entry and making that usable space. And then on the second floor, there are a series of brick infills that we'll be making windows out of. And we'll be putting windows in there, and that makes usable space. So when our liaison mentioned that we don't need the addition, we're able to not get by without the addition because we're creating this additional space on the second floor and on the attic level. I mentioned the 1970s renovation with the 2x4 acoustic ceiling, the fluorescent lights. That's the latest that's been done to this building, other than some HVAC upgrades. Not to shame the building, but upper left is the existing conduit and electrical system. You can see that dates back to the 1947 upgrades. And the upper right slide is really when I mentioned that exciting recreation of the attic space. As part of the 6.2 million renovation, we are looking at upgrading the structure because that creates seismic bracing for the building and helps to restore the core and shell. That's the essence of the $6 million request. Next. I'm not going to go through these, but you can see it's a highly efficient plan. The gross square footage per person is really extremely efficient. We're able to do that very efficient and open layout through the removal of existing structure in the building. So again, that accounts for why we don't need the addition on the back. The inside has become much more efficient. There will be 61 parking spaces. The front lawn of the yard will be restored. There's no parking. This is a specific request from the Historic Commission to restore that. First slide I showed the historic horse and buggy coming down the road, Highland Avenue, and then having that lawn space there. I'm sorry, that's tough to see, but it is a total project of $20,875,000. In that is the Hillside renovation, which we've taken out of the eligible costs for the Emery Grover renovation. Through our analysis that we presented a couple months ago, we have a $12.9 million eligible cost. The request is for $6 million, and as I mentioned, it'll primarily focus on the historic restoration on the outside of the building, so there's a tangible evidence of what this CPC money will contribute to the town of Needham. And my last slide is just a summary of why we think it complies with the regulations. We are preserving and protecting National Historic Building. We think it's really a public benefit for the school committee. You saw the condition of their building. And we're making a building that's very inefficient, as close to net zero as is possible given its use. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And do you have anything to add?
Okay, so now first, those present in the room, questions or comments? Yes.
Gloria Grice, 384 Webster Street. I'm the executive director of the Needham Historical Society and also a member of the Needham Historical Commission. We went extensively through the reasons that we supported this project during the October town meeting process. This is a building that in its day was really embodied the aspirations of the Needham coming into a new century, and change in the importance of education, and really it's sort of that physical embodiment. And it's a building the town is extremely proud of. It's a building the town will be very proud of. Again, it is an iconic gateway structure. But an additional comment I'd like to make is that we tend often to see these things as expenses or as drains on our public purse, and not see the benefit that accrues over time from them. Historic preservation has proven economic benefits to a community. It actually generates over time increased downtown business. Look at, for example, the town hall and what a benefit that's been. The renovation of the town hall has been not only psychologically to the town, but economically to the town. The stability that historic preservation creates induces people to buy into a town. They know that, you know, the town's not going to be a strip mall in 3 years. They know they're buying into a town that has a sense of identity, that has a sense of stability, that brings in residential growth, it brings in economic growth to the local businesses. So it's not only an expense today, but it's also an investment in the future.
Thank you. And yes.
My name is Susan Welby. I live at 857 Webster Street, and I'm a town meeting member from Precinct G. 26 years ago, next month, I was first elected to the school committee. I served 9 years. During that time, Emery Grover had a lot of problems. when I was first elected, we had the Pollard fiasco. We were trying to deal with a construction nightmare at Pollard. A lot of projects had to be put aside because of new ways of doing construction. But the administration building had some serious issues, and we worked very hard to try and keep that building operating. The third floor was about ready to fall through. We had it secured so that we could figure out how to get people in there to get files out. We did that. Halfway through my school committee time, the right portico was ready to fall down. There was a big push to have that removed. I fought very hard to make sure that we maintained the historical integrity of that building. So I saved that portico. And today I'd like to save the entire building. We will have a brand new building in a historic structure that will serve this town for many years to come in a way that we can be proud. So I would really like to strongly support this project.
Thank you, Ms. Welby, and thank you for saving that portico. Yes, sir.
Joe Lightburn, 40 Linden Street, Precinct D, town member. Historic structures give towns a sense of place, a place of history, and look back at the achievements that the early residents made. And I think that this is an important thing to do. We have very few historic structures left in town. This being one of them, I wholly support it. Thank you.
Thank you. There's another hand up. Yes.
Hi, I'm Connie Barr. My address is 205 Edgewater Drive. I think some of you in the room know me now as the current chair of the school committee. And as such, I would like to thank everyone here who supported design funds at the recent town meeting. We really appreciate that. But I'd like to set that aside, if possible, for a moment and speak as an almost 40-year resident of the town, as a town meeting member for Precinct E, as a former liaison to the CBC from the school committee, so with some sense of understanding of how things go, and as a former board member of the Historical Museum. All of those things give me great interest in this project, and I know we're not talking about whether this project goes forward, but whether CPC will provide some funds, and I'm strongly in support of that. There are three by regulation buckets that CPC funds go toward. Certainly support as much affordable housing in town that we can manage. I think CPC is supportive of a lot of recreational projects. This is the only historical project on the docket right now, and I really hope that you can support it to the best of your ability. It's really exciting to think of this strong structure that remains, the envelope of this building, and that will now be able to have a modern, efficient, well-run school department office. School department's well-run, but the office will be efficient as well.
No promise it will be well run.
Well, it better
Oh
be
boy.
after they help.
Oh boy. Oh boy. That's out
I
there.
know, as I said, I sat for 2 years at meetings of the CPC, how thoughtful you are about designating these funds, which do come ultimately from the taxpayer and from the state. That is so much appreciated. I think this is a very worthy project. In fact, something like, I believe, $18 million of this project was 16.8 was eligible for CPC funding. We are clearly not asking for that much because we know what other worthy projects are in town, but I really hope that the CPC will support this to the best of their ability. So that's my other hat. I must say, I also think that as school committee chair. Once again, thank you all.
I'm sorry, I missed that last comment. I'm sorry.
That's sort of my town resident, town meeting, former member of the Native Historical Board. but with my school committee chair hat. I also support.
Okay, I understand. Okay, great. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, yes, sir, state your
Michael
name.
Grice, 384 Webster Street. I'm also a current member of the school committee, town meeting member. By and large, I want to echo all of what you've heard today. One piece I will add to bridge the gap, which is involving, is that when I joined the school committee 16 years ago, one of my first responsibilities was to hire a new superintendent. And I remember wondering if anyone was going to go work for us, given the condition of that building then. I would also add that in the time since then, personally and the school committee as a whole has worked very hard to focus on investing in the facilities for our children are. And we are at the point, I'm saying this as an individual school committee member, where we really can't put off the working conditions of our folks. So for all these respects, I am fully in support of everything you've been asked.
Thank you. Any other comments from those here present in the room? Okay. All right, how about our listening public?
I don't see any hands raised, so if you want to talk on the Emory, oh, there it is. Figured somebody was waiting, so I wanted to give them time.
Hands? Any hands up?
Just one.
Okay.
There we go.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
You need to state your name and where you live.
My name is Daniel Matthews. I'm a member of the select board, but I don't live at Town Hall. I live at 31 Rosemary Street. I wanted to thank you, Peter, and members of the committee for coming to present the status of the articles to the select board this past week. And I wanted to take a moment to speak, basically to support or emphasize some things that have already been said in support of the $6 million of CPC historic funding toward the cost of the renovation of Emery Grover. The availability of matching funds for Emery Grover was actually a factor for the voters in considering the initial approval of the CPC surcharge in 2004. We recognize there are many competing needs, but this is an important one of long standing. The requested $6 million is less than the qualified amount under the statute and has been scaled back in that way. Town meeting approved the design funds last fall, and although the decision about making a recommendation to town meeting rests with your committee, the request for consideration of $6 million for this as a CPC historic contribution has been considered in the proposals throughout. We on the select board believe that the town meeting members will support that, but your recommendation is essential for town meeting to have the opportunity to vote on it. It should be noted as we talk about competing needs that and I think Connie Barr referred to this, any portion of the $6 million that has not come for the project through CPC will have to be covered from general town revenues, which have the same kinds of competing needs as the CPC funding. The renovated building will improve the ability of the school department to provide essential services, and it is clearly in the category of a valuable historical asset that is worth protecting and keeping and using for the future if we can. It's a needed and long delayed use of CPC funds, and I ask the members of the committee to favorably consider the $6 million in funding. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Matthews. We appreciate that. Okay. All right. Any other?
I don't see any other hands.
All right, great. All right, now we're going to move on to FY 23-07. This is the Needham High School tennis court improvements.
I'm going to promote Stacy to panelist. She'll be presenting remotely.
Okay, well, let's have somebody introduce it.
I will do that, Mr. Chair. This is the Needham Park and Recreation request for high school tennis court improvements. They're requesting $50,000 in design funds to repair or replace the existing tennis courts at Needham High School. This project will evaluate the current condition of the tennis courts, provide design options for both a resurfacing project and/or full renovation. Once feedback has been received by the community, these funds will also be used complete all design documents for the project. Having said that, I would like to turn this over to Stacy Mulroy, who is the Needham Park and Recreation Director, for further details.
Okay, thank you.
All right, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you everyone for having me to present on this. The CPC has seen these slides before, but I will go through them fairly quickly, and then if you have any questions, please don't hesitate. So this project is for the Needham High School tennis courts, which are in disrepair and need to, the high school tennis team is unable to play their matches on the courts right now. They actually travel to Mills and or Newman to have their matches. We have 3 sets of courts, 12 courts in all: Mills, Newman, and the high school courts. Slide. So right now we're requesting $50,000 for design and feasibility study. That money is going to be used to figure out if we can do a low-end resurfacing project, where basically you'll take off the layer of surfacing and put a new layer down and keep all of the amenities, posts, nets, fencing, everything. The high end of this is basically a full reno, which would rip it down to the stone gravel that is underneath the pavement that's there now, and figure out if we can keep posts if they need to be replaced, and fencing. So it would be a complete overhaul. Slide. The next couple slides are just some pictures of what is out there now. And these are the cracks that for the high school tennis team, they do practice, I think, periodically on these, but they cannot hold matches on these. So they tend to travel. Some of these cracks are serious ankle turning issues. These are just the routes that the students and athletes have to go from the high school to either Mills or Newman courts. And as anybody knows, the high school has first rights to all our fields and courts from after school until 6 p.m. So as the high school starts to use Newman and Mills more, it does reduce the amount of hours that the public can use our courts, including the new pickleball lines down at Mills. So this is our outline. Summer, fall 22, create the scope and design, go out to bid. Fall 22, award, select design, submit requests and applications in the fall of 22 to CPC and Capital for funding construction. Spring, we would create the scope, and summer of 23, after school is out, would be the ideal timing for the construction. Thank you.
Okay. All right, that concludes the presentation by the proponent. Do we have questions or comments present in the room? Yes.
Bruceeisenhut. I just have a question. I just think it would be important for town meeting to know exactly when does the public have full access to the courts.
Sure. So you definitely have full access to the courts from 6 p.m. on Monday through Friday during the school year, and Saturday and Sunday all day. During the summer months, it's all day unless the Park and Rec does run a summer program Monday through Friday for about 6 weeks at Newman. Currently from 3 to 6 for this spring season, spring 2022, the high school will be using both Mills and Newman for their practices and matches until 6 p.m. Monday through Friday.
All right, any other questions or comments from those present in the room? All right, so now we're going to go and see if we have anyone with their hand up from the listening public.
I do not see anyone.
Okay.
Oh, hold on, I do have a public comment. Matt Haggerty from 110 Pine Grove Street says, I'm a new Needham resident and curious about opportunities for corporate sponsorship for these types of projects.
So that's a question. We'll put that on the back as soon as and when we finish with any other comments, okay? Anyone else is that it? Okay, good. So we finished with the questions. Do you have an ability to answer that question?
Me? Sure.
Okay.
No, that's my answer. Sure.
Okay.
Park and Rec has not partnered with corporate sponsors in the past that I'm aware of, at least certainly not in my tenure of COVID. But it is not uncommon and increasingly more common for Park and Rec departments to seek out corporate sponsorships. So it is certainly something that we would look into and begin engagement with.
Okay.
I did have one more pop up as we were finishing up that one, and it's from Georgina Arietta Rutnick from 236 Greendale Avenue. And she says, I'm in favor of allocation of $50,000 of CPC funds to study the repair refurbishing of the Needham High School tennis courts.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Is that it?
That is all.
All right, great. All right, so we've concluded 2023-07. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you.
You're welcome. I wish I had known that I was going to be on that giant screen back there. I would have sat a little further back.
All right, we're going to move on.
Lessons learned.
We'll move on to 2023-09. That's the boat launch. And that's going to be introduced, I believe, by Reg Foster.
Yes, thank you very much, Peter. This is an application for $285,000 to complete a boat launch. And the history of this is that in 2015, the last time it was on the CPC, there was an application for $30,000 of design funds for not creating a new boat launch, but basically upgrading one that is already there. The location actually is right across South Street from where we're sitting right now. For one reason or another, the money was spent, and then was spent, but not until 2021 to then roll into creating a detailed construction design.
You're just introducing it. We have the presenter.
Yeah, and
he's doing great. Don't interrupt him.
Is Stacy Mulroy, director. They jerk my leash here. So, Parks and Rec. I'm also the liaison here, so I take a proactive approach to that job here, as I've stated before.
Okay. All right, Stacy.
All right, the boat launch. So like Reg said, this started in 2015, long before my time, and through various reasons, and then COVID, of course, didn't get really kicked off until 2021. Slide. So in this presentation, we'll talk about the summary, the design firm, work and recommendations, the schedule, the design, and then we'll have time for some questions that Reg will be happy to answer for you. Great. So this project is for the reconfiguration of the parking area, accessibility improvements to the path, allowing for more equitable access to the river, as well as allowing vehicles to back down, installation of a small concrete ramp, and clearing of some vegetation. So what we're looking to do is make a 12-foot wide gravel path so that people can back their vehicles down, unload their boats, and then drive back up. Slide. Ty and Bond is the design team on this project. They have given us some work and recommendations. I will skim through. I won't read every word. I promise. I'm so sorry. So they have completed thorough evaluation, flood profiles, elevations, and the protected wetland classifications in accordance with Massachusetts and Needham. What they are recommending, what are they recommending? Oh, wow, that's a rough one. They are recommending the installation of a 12-foot by 15-foot long concrete ramp at the indicated mean annual high water of the Charles River. So that would be where you put the boats into the Charles River. Installation of wooden guardrails at the parking spaces, picnic tables and entrance, and accessible 12-foot wide gravel path between the parking area and the water. Vegetation removals is approximately 1,800 square feet and proposed along the dirt trail to accommodate more accessible gravel path. Seed mix will be used to revegetate the disturbed areas, and erosion controls will be installed. This is the overall schedule. Design, which is complete, in progress permitting, currently in progress procurement, summer of 22, and construction, summer of 22. Not sure how well those are coming up, but those are some of our engineering documents. Side. Again. And then these are the views from the area that we are discussing. And that's it. Questions?
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any comments or questions from those present in the room? Yes, sir.
Good evening. Kenneth Goldberg. My address is 11 South Court in Needham, and I live practically across the street from this site. Livingston Circle being one edge of it, being directly across the street, a couple of feet up the road. With all due respect to the good intentions of the Parks and Recreation Committee, I oppose this project, and I think you should either table it or deny the request altogether at this point. There's been no meaningful community input. There's I saw in the submission whether any statistics have been generated regarding use, and there's none. That was one of the questions that was asked. That was the answer. There's been no one has been sent out there to. You could send a high school kid out there on weekends during the summer and the fall. And, hey, what's going on here? What kind of use is going on here? It wouldn't cost $30,000, I can tell you that. It hasn't happened. The only reason I know about this is because I live within a certain buffer zone where the Conservation Commission has to let people know about requests for waivers of certain regulations, and this project falls within that buffer zone, that requirement. There are dozens of houses on Livingston Circle, and I think 6 or 8 were notified that are within that buffer zone. Half the people in the buffer zone live on the other side of this street, Dedham Avenue, up in Edgewood Circle and that area. They're not neighbors to this project. I am. Livingston Circle is. My other points, and I know I only have 2 minutes, so I'll try and speak quickly.
That's okay.
The area to be improved has been literally unchanged for many years. I mean, I've only been there 15 years, but other neighbors have been there longer, and they'll testify that nothing's really happened over there. And it has been a useful boat access. It's used as a boat access. People use it. So we're sort of begging the question as to why we need to build a road and a ramp. So my contention would be there's no need to change it. From a technical point of view, I think if you talk to people who actually use it, they'll say it really depends on the weather. So you're going to be building a ramp and a road to an area that doesn't always work for boating and canoeing because you really can't go very far. If you get good rain, then you've got some water there that you can row or canoe back and forth, maybe further, but without that, you don't get very far. I'm not an expert on that, but other people are, and they mentioned this at the CONCOM hearing. I would suggest that the recreation look at other areas that maybe aren't as difficult in terms of improving, that don't have neighborhoods right next to them. And I know that one of my neighbors has suggested 2 parks and recreation, one such area on a path, I think it's called Great Heron Drive, on the other side of 128, where people do access the river over there. And it's just an old dead-end road that might be a better spot. Won't impact any neighborhood because there's no houses over there. Talking about the neighborhood, I would suggest that they are overwhelmingly not in favor of this. There was a Conservation Commission hearing on the 28th, and at least 6 to 8 people spoke up at that hearing via the Zoom. I think others were also online. And they basically said their input, their comments ranged, and you can check it online yourself and see what they said. I was one of them. The comments ranged from do nothing, put up a sign, boat launch here, which maybe that might be helpful to people if you want to improve access to boating. I think many people said it would be nice if the path down to the river were improved a little bit, but I don't really think anyone was interested in a gravel road and a 180 square foot concrete pad on the river. I call that the party pad. I call that high school kids going out there on a summer night with their, it won't be Pepsi and Coke, let me tell you right now. It will be something, it will be alcoholic beverages. It's a great place to hang out if you want to hang out by the river. You're building it for them. I would finally add that at that hearing, the commissioners of the Conservation Commission, I think were somewhat, I think it's fair to say, skeptical about the scope of the project. And I don't think that it would necessarily pass if it's going to be presented in the manner, in the exact same way it was last October. It would be, I think, scaled back significantly because there was some interest about maybe improving the path a little bit. But gravel road and a concrete pad and all these other types of improvements were sort of anathema to the idea of conserving what's basically been an open glen with a path down to the river for the past God knows how many years. So in a sense, I think we're putting the cart before the horse here. We're asking for money for something that really may not even be allowed. So I would recommend that this get tabled, or I don't know what your options are, or denied.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, any other comments or questions?
I have one comment that was written in from Jen Flanagan, who we previously heard from, and it was a question actually. Can you navigate to the south under the bridge from the proposed launch? He says he was not able to when he launched from there previously.
Okay, are there any other hands up?
Hands raised, that was the only response I received.
Okay, so that's a question, and so let's see if the proponents can respond to it.
That would be me again, right? Got it. So my understanding is at this point in time, it's very dependent on the weather and the amount of rain.
Okay, great. All right, any other questions or comments?
I don't see anything.
All right, great. All right.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Zimbone has to withdraw.
Okay, just we'll note for the record, Mr. Zimbone is logged off. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. So now we're moving on to 2023-11 Needham Community Farms construction of growing beds. Artie Crocker, one of the liaisons, will introduce the project.
Thank you, Peter. Again, Artie Crocker. And the project, as Peter was noting, is the 2023-11, the Needham Community Farm growing beds request. The request is for $200,000 for the production or building of 150 beds, which will essentially be used as, let's say, rentals to the Needham community. And to present that by the Needham Community Farms is Joe Leghorn.
As usual, I'm always revising stuff. The old lawyer in me.
Sorry, we just have to account for only a few USB plugs on one laptop.
Oh, wow, look at that. Wow.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that introduction, Artie. I thank all of you for your attention during various meetings and the materials that we sent. I am Joe Leghorn. I am now the vice president of the Needham Community Farm. And the Needham Community Farm was started it was incorporated in 2008. It's been operating at the Pine Street location, also known as the Nike Missile Site, for about 11 or 12 years. we found in what we hear most often when we do surveys with people, what would you like to see out there? It is beds we can rent. That's not part of our program. We do have gardening classes. The Native Community Farm was founded, this is an actual picture of it.
Hold on, it's not presenting it, hold on.
Oh, okay.
No.
Share.
All ready to go, Joe. I had it ready to go.
Then we just need to go to slideshow.
That's when we lose it if we do.
All right, that's fine.
This one?
Anyway,
way before then.
the Native Community Farm was founded to really to address a few things in town. One of them to deal with food justice and food insecurity, to work to educate about environmental issues and sustainable growing, and to just create community by encouraging volunteers working collectively. And we've been doing this for a while, and over the years we have gotten hundreds, if not thousands, of individual supporters. Next slide. We've also established ourselves and gotten support from a good chunk of the business community who help us maintain our program, where at least half of our food are distributed to those in need of either through our own mobile market at 3 of the public housing locations. The folks up at High Rock can walk down to Linden Chambers, and also over at Robert Cook and at Seabeds, and we do that twice a week. So half our produce goes there, half of our produce we make a little money on, and also we do that to make sure that we comply with state and federal regulations where we sell half of what we grow, so we're eligible for grants from them. Crazy world. Next slide. So here's our spot out at the Nike site. The gray area at the bottom left is where we're currently farming, where the beds would go. On the upper right, that brown thing would be a sort of paved path from the parking lot, which would be accessible for wheelchairs and people with walkers and canes, to make sure it's accessible to anyone who wants to farm there. On the left is sort of how we would lay out the beds. I've rethought that. They're going to go the other direction, so they go east-west, but next slide. This is the site. One of the things about the site is when we talk about the school and school renovations, this site is basically the fill from the high school renovation of 20 years ago that was packed solid. So it does not drain. And so one of the efforts that you have to do is to somehow get drainage to make it safe for people to walk there. But it still is not, you can't grow there simply because it's unsuitable. So the program will build 150 beds. It would level the site, put in drainage, and be fenced for security and to keep the deer from eating everything that people are trying to grow. Important thing in gardening. So that, next slide, please. Here are the beds. They're interesting. They're 22 inches high. We will have 15 or 16 beds that will be double that height for people with back problems, so they could garden or from a wheelchair. In addition, we will have at least 15 beds that will be given away to folks in housing or that are EBT eligible. You know, in keeping with our goal of trying to address food insecurity. And I think food insecurity hit home during the early pandemic and is still with us. People like to know that they can have their own fresh produce. So they'll be, and those taller ones will be about 4 feet high. So they're good. Next slide, please. Why 150 beds? Always a question that I got. And the way we came up with it is 150 beds and $100 a bed. It's actually a premium price. So we've got to entice people to do this. One is when they buy into the mission, they look at it as a donation. 2, some of the amenities that we provide might attract them. But it basically means that at 150 beds, 13.5 is about what we're going to get a year. Our estimated costs over 10 years, and these have about a 10-year lifespan, and total expenses are about $15,000. So we're making, you've got a range in there. We might be ahead of the game. We might not be, and certainly anything we're ahead of the game just gets plowed back in because we're not for profit. And the other one too is that we would establish a fund, and if we do better than we expect, we would add other amenities, but certainly we could build a fund to replace the wood in the beds in 10 years. So that we won't have to, because part of our program is each year, new layer of compost would go on each bed. So, and if we're wrong on the expenses, Needham Community Farm, that's the risk we're taking, but we're comfortable with these numbers. And, that's we are there. Next, please. Here's the soil. It's, quality soil from a really well-known compost company. On the next slide, we're going to have a shed there. So there'll be tools that are community tools. People don't need to bring anything. People don't need to own anything to be a gardener and a grower. It'll be all there for the next slide. The gardeners will give preference to Needham residents. We'll, rent to others. Maybe, according to Park and Rec, you can charge a little premium to out-of-towners. That'll be good. We plan to have a water source, water brought in, high quality compost, as I mentioned. It's one of those that it's a great thing. And the other thing that struck me tonight when we were talking about Emery Grover is Mrs. Grace talked about the value to community, that doing that is an investment. And a lot of study has gone into, next slide, please, the benefits of recreation to the community, including a lot of studies by the federal government, state governments, academics, into the value of leisure time. And a conservative estimate is $10 to $15 an hour in benefit. And when you figure it out over 10 years, that amounts to millions of dollars as a return on investment of $200,000. Lots of studies have shown gardening improves physical and mental health. Growing your own food, pulling that perfectly shaped carrot by a teenager gives them such a great sense of self-confidence and self-assurance. It is a great learning experience, and it'll be an opportunity for people to meet people in town that they wouldn't normally meet, not from their neighborhood, some other neighborhood. So, that's where we are, and thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the public might have.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Thank you. All right, so now questions by any or comments by any of those present here. All right. How about our listening?
I see one hand raised, so I will bring them in.
I want to note for everybody that we've gotten several pages. We've compiled several pages of the emails from supporters of the community farms. So the emails are effective, and I just want everyone to know that we've received them and we have read them. They've been distributed. Thank you.
Knowing the limits in the room, I think that we encourage supporters to send comments as opposed to crowd in a room like this. All right.
Anna, go ahead.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Yeah?
Name?
Yeah. Yep. Please state.
My name is Anna Aguilera. I'm a Needham resident. I live at 12 Glenwood Road. I'm also a professor of environmental science and biology at Simmons University and a former director of the Colleges of the Fenway Center for Sustainability. I strongly support this project with the Needham Community Farm for all the reasons that Joe mentioned, but I also wanted to point out that local agriculture has very important climate mitigation benefits, specifically building soil, creating compost on site, and using compost on site traps carbon in the ground, in the earth where it needs to be, and keeps it out of the atmosphere. It also, by producing food locally, reduces the carbon footprint of food access. So increasingly, local agriculture is this big piece of sustainable development, and other municipalities or the towns are really pushing this. Mayor Wu in Boston has just announced the creation of a Office of Urban Agriculture to support urban agriculture in Boston. And she has this wonderful quote, a very quick quote. She said it so succinctly and nicely that I want to quote her. She says, "Urban agriculture, including community gardens, urban farms, food forests, and other ways of growing food in the city, can directly strengthen our local food system, mitigate the impacts of the climate crisis, and ensure equitable access to healthy food," which are all main drivers and missions of the Needham Community Farm. So I just think it's really important for Needham to show our community and our children that, you know, we are ready and willing to do what's right when it comes to the climate and justice. And so I really support this. And on a personal, so that's like personal and professional, but on a personal level, I have a nephew in a wheelchair and he gets left out of so many activities. And so when I heard that there would be wheelchair accessible gardening beds, it nearly brought a tear to my eye. And I think it's a really beautiful thing. And that, and I really hope Needham supports this for so many reasons. So thank you for the opportunity to share my opinion.
Thank you. Okay, any other hands up in the public?
I saw one go up and down a couple times. I just want to give him a second.
I'm not sure yet.
Raise your hand, and if not,
I think it was whack-a-mole.
all right, I don't see any.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. It's just a written comment from Georgina Arietta Rupnik at 236 Greendale Ave. It's a precinct J. I strongly support the allocation of $200,000 of CPC funds to assist the Needham Community Farm in building and providing garden beds for Needham citizens for planting individual gardens. This is another way to encourage community in our town.
Okay, good. Can we print out those comments? Can you capture the comments that you're receiving tonight?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you print those out so they can be part of the record? We've got these emails as part of the record. You know,
Georgina also sent an email.
Pardon me?
She was also an email.
Oh, shoot, that's better. Okay. Okay, good. All right, so that concludes 2023-11. Now, this is the last issue is the issue of the CPC increasing funding, proposed increase of funding to the restricted funds, community housing restricted funds from 11% to 22%. I'll speak to that. I think that I had addressed this briefly in the beginning, which was that the act itself requires that a minimum of 10% of CPA revenues are to be allocated or set aside for three specific reserve funds. One is historic preservation, the other is open space, and the third is community housing. We had examined this issue in our prior funding cycle, and the question arose about planning for requests that would be coming up by the Needham Housing Authority. And we did take a kind of look at it through a historic lens, no pun intended, to look at where we had spent the funds over the 15 years or so that we have been using CPA funds. And it was weighted heavily towards historic preservation and park and recreation. And that's not that. Most of that had to do with the fact that we made some investments that really did benefit all the community, including restoring our town hall and building our town pool. And so those were kind of heavy weights on those categories. But we wanted to address that, and we also wanted to kind of build a reserve account that's available for projects that we had anticipated coming down the pike from the Needham Housing Authority. And you could see that that is now becoming much more of a reality. And so as a result, we're going to be discussing and as part of our financial warrant, voting on whether or not we should continue with that program, if you will, which is increase the funding to the community preservation, to the Community Housing Reserve Fund from 11% to 22%. I'll note just for the listening public, there's documents available to show this, but the balance in the CPA Community Housing Reserve Fund presently is approximately $3.2 million. And just to give you some perspective, this proposal would increase the required allocated amount or set aside from approximately $400,000 to approximately $800,000. So then that would increase the balance in that fund to close to $4 million before we drew down on it with the projects that we're hearing about and considering and are under consideration this year from the Housing Authority. And I'll further note that this same request was approved by town meeting last year. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that the public was aware of that. And so if you have comments or questions, we're available to address that. No?
Don't see any.
Okay. All right. Oh, good. Yes.
Jan Silva, 154 Tree Road. I generally support more affordable housing funds, and I think this is a great idea. There's a lack of housing across the Commonwealth, and my opinion is that every town needs to step up now more than ever, and this is one way to help our town do that. Our planning board does a great job in zoning and thinking about housing, and Needham Housing Authority obviously does a great job, and I just like to support everybody by having some extra money available when it's needed. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Okay. All right, any hands up in the public?
Nope, no hands up.
All right, good. All right, so that concludes our public hearing. We have to, should we adjourn? Okay. So we will have, yes.
One comment before you, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
I'm putting my League of Women Voters hat on.
And what's your name, Susan?
The League of Women Voters will be doing in-person warrant meetings again this year. That's something I organized, and it's scheduled for Monday, April 25th at 7:30 p.m. at the Center of the Heights. And we'd love to have you all represent CPC so you can address any questions people have.
Okay, we'll talk to the committee about that. It's nice to have representatives of the CPC in each of the different rooms, and we'll see how if we can staff it that way. Okay, thank you for reminding us of that. Giving us that date. Okay. Okay, let's have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, that's by Artie Crocker, second by Chris Gerstel. Again, we have to do roll call. Ms. McKnight.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Dorfman.
Yes.
Artie, Mr. Crocker.
Yes, yes.
In favor, yes.
Yes.
Mr. Barnes, Mr. Kirsten.
Yes.
Mr. Dermott.
In the affirmative.
Okay, and the chair votes aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Public hearing.
Oh, the public hearing is adjourned. Good. Okay, and now I don't think we have any further business, do we?
I think we're done.
Wait, hold on. We just adjourned the public hearing. I don't have any updates. I will, the schedule. I'll be consulting with the finance committee on next Wednesday. Okay? All right? And, okay, good. All right, good. So now we're gonna have now we're gonna adjourn the meeting itself. I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
And a second by Bob German. Okay, good. Roll call.
In favor, yes.
Dorfman.
Yes.
Crocker.
Aye.
Yes.
Barnes. Gerstel. Dermody.
Yes. Right.
And Foster.
Yes.
Just say yes.
We are adjourned.
Good job.